You probably see the Sahara as endless, boring sand. Yellow dunes, a scorching sun, maybe a few tired camels, and number 39's, empty. But what if I told you that this is geography and number 39's biggest lie? Beneath millions of tons of hot sand lie not only stones, but also traces of giant rivers, ruins of unknown empires, and even the bones of monsters that ruled the world long before the dinosaurs. The Sahara is not a desert. It is a giant safe, the safe that we are only now beginning to open. The surface area of this desert is so extensive that if we placed it on a map, it would cover almost the entire territory of the United States of America. 9 million square kilometers of secrets. And the most terrifying thing is that this sand is like time. It can hide evidence. For centuries, people have disappeared there, lost in the shadows, trying to find the legendary Golden City or oasis of eternal life. But the reality we discovered in the 21st century turned out to be much more fantastic than any legend. Today we, and number 39, LL, go deep underground to see what LL's been hidden by the sands for the last 5,000 years, from ancient spaceports to oceans that boiled for a second. Fasten your seatbelts, because the first thing we discover will be visible even from space. In 1965, the astronauts of the Gemini mission flew over Africa with the aim of photographing the Earth and number 39's surface and looking for geological anomalies. And when they looked out the window towards Mauritania, they breathed a sigh of relief, to put it mildly. In the middle of a lifeless plateau, a giant eye stared at them. This is not a metaphor. Perfectly concentric circles created a dartboard-like structure, only 40 kilometers in size. Neither from an airplane nor from the ground was it possible to grasp the magnitude of this landscape. People have walked these rings for centuries, believing them to be simply strange mountains. But from space it was clear. They aren't mountains. It's something artificial, too perfect to be a coincidence. As soon as the photos appeared in the press, conspiracy theorists around the world cried out that they had discovered it. They were talking, of course, about Atlantis. And you know what? The strangest thing is, the problem with this theory is that it sounds too plausible. If you open the dialogues of Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher who first described Atlantis, your hair will stand on end. Plato wrote that the capital of Atlantis was surrounded by 3 circles of water and 2 rings of land. Look at the satellite images of the Richet structure. These are the rings. Plato said that to the north of the city lay mountains, and to the south a great plain. And, again, a coincidence. Even the dimensions that the philosopher indicated in ancient units of length, when converted to modern kilometers, coincide almost perfectly with the diameter of this eye. The internet exploded with theories. Some claimed it was a crater from an ancient nuclear explosion. Others claimed it was a landing site for extraterrestrial spacecraft that had fossilized over time. It seemed that the history of humanity was about to take a turn, but the geologists, those who went there with hammers and tools, quickly cooled the fervor of the dreamers. Reality proved ruthless to myths, but astonishing to science. It turns out that the eye of the Sahara is a geological dome. Imagine a gigantic bubble of magma that began to rise from the depths of the earth millions of years ago. It pressed on the surface, swelling the layers of rock like a giant abscess, but the volcano was never born. The magma solidified underground, and the wind and water began their work. Hundreds of millions of years of erosion had worn away the top of this dome layer by layer. And then the cunning mechanics of nature came into play. Rocks erode at different rates. Hard layers remain upright as ridges, while soft layers erode, forming depressions. This is how these perfect rings were formed. This is not a city built by gods. This is a cross-section of the Earth and number 39's crust, an open book on geology. But even knowing the truth, being at the center of this structure is unsettling. You understand that nature is the craziest architect. But if the eye turns out to be just a stone, the next discovery in the sands made scientists doubt where they were, in the desert or at the bottom of the sea. Let and number 39's go east to Egypt. About 150 kilometers from Cairo, there is a place that looks like the set of an apocalyptic movie. This is Wadi al-Khitan, or the Valley of the Whales. Imagine walking on hot sand, surrounded only by dunes, burnt rocks, and a wind that howls as if someone were crying. The temperature in the shade is around 45 degrees Celsius, something that is almost non-existent here. You come across a strange, smooth stone sticking out of the ground. You start digging it up, thinking it and number 39's a piece of rock, but suddenly you realize it and number 39's a spine. A giant spine the size of a tree trunk. You dig deeper, inch by inch, and the sand reveals a skull with a huge mouth full of teeth. But it, and number 39's, not a dinosaur. This is a whale, and it and number 39's not alone. If you climb the dune and look down, you and number 39 will see that the whole valley is full of skeletons. Hundreds of enormous creatures lie here, in the middle of one of the driest and most unforgiving deserts in the world. It looks like a surrealist painting by Salvador Dalí, sea monsters swimming in golden sand. When the first European explorers found these bones in the 19th century, they were amazed. They simply couldn't and #39 imagine where whales could appear in the middle of the Sahara. Local Bedouins have avoided this place for centuries, considering it cursed. Legends said that these were the remains of terrible genies or monsters that the gods turned to stone for their sins. Religious zealots, upon learning of the discovery, immediately declared that this was irrefutable proof of the Great Flood. The water rose so high that the ocean flooded Africa. Whales swam across the desert, and when the water receded, they didn't have time to return and died. This version sounded logical and reassuring if it weren't in #39 for one small detail that ruined everything. The scientists began cleaning the bones from the sand and noticed something that made them rub their eyes. These whales had legs. Yes, you heard right. In the Valley of the Whales, no modern whales have been found, but rather basilosaurs, ancient predators that dominated the seas 40 million years ago. And these weren't in #39 peaceful giants that ate plankton. The Basilosaurus was an 18-meter-long killing machine. That was the height of a 6-story building. It had a serpentine body, like a giant eel, and a mouth full of teeth capable of crushing bones. The stomachs of these fossilized monsters contained the remains of sharks and giant turtles. They were at the top of the food chain. But the most important thing was their hind limbs. They had small but fully formed legs with toes, knees, and ankles. These legs were too weak to walk on land, but they were a clear reminder of the past. This discovery was a golden opportunity for evolutionary biologists. It filled a gap in the history of life on Earth, proving that whales were once land animals, similar to wolves or hyenas that decided to return to the water. But how did they get here, among the sands? The answer lies in plate tectonics. 40 million years ago, the world map was different. North Africa did not exist in its current form. The ancient ocean of Tethys once bathed this place. It was a warm, shallow tropical paradise covered in mangroves. There was so much food here that life was very lively. Imagine warm water lagoons where giant sea snakes, ancestors of manatees, and crocodiles swim. This was a bathing area during the Eocene. Basilosaurus swam here, dying or reproducing, like modern whales in warm bays. But then the climate in Africa changed. The continent began to drift north and collided with Europe. The ocean floor began to rise. The water receded, leaving behind swamps that eventually dried up and became a desert. The sand has preserved history better than any museum. Walking through Wadi al-Khitan today, you are literally walking on the seabed. The crunching under your shoes, ISN and #39, just rocks, but fossilized shells, corals, and mangrove roots that are millions of years old. This place reminds us that nothing on Earth lasts forever. Where you are sunbathing and drinking water from a canteen today, the ocean may return tomorrow, and vice versa. But if the ocean left this place millions of years ago, then the next mystery of the Sahara is much younger. And it tells us that people lived here very recently, and, in a way, we can, and number 39, can't even imagine. Let and number 39s go to the heart of the desert to a place called the Stone Forest. This is the Tassili Nen and number 39, Ajer Plateau in Algeria. Getting there is quite an achievement. It is a labyrinth of thousands of rocks, canyons, and sandstones, eroded into strange shapes that resemble towers and mushrooms. The place seems so otherworldly that you feel like you and number 39 have landed on Mars. In 1933, a French army lieutenant was patrolling this hellish region with camels and entered one of the gorges to seek refuge from the unbearable midday sun. He raised his head, expecting to see a bare rock, and was paralyzed with horror and delight. The canyon walls stared at him. They were covered with thousands, tens of thousands of drawings. Y no eran garabatos primos de cavernícolas. Eran enorme, colorida y detallados frescos que contaban la historia de un mundo completamente diferente. The lieutenant saw scenes that could not possibly exist in the Sahara. The drawings depicted athletic, dark-skinned people herding huge herds of spotted cattle. Hunters with bows pursued antelopes and giraffes. There were elephants, rhinoceroses, ostriches, and hippos. Animals that cannot survive without deep fresh water were drawn with such anatomical accuracy that there was no room for doubt. The artist saw them with his own eyes every day. But the most striking image was that of the boats. Enormous reed boats full of people, sailing where now, hundreds of kilometers away, there is not a drop of moisture, only dust and scorpions. This discovery caused a real stir in the scientific world. How could ancient peoples have imagined an aquatic world in the middle of the driest desert? The skeptics scoffed. They said they had simply ingested hallucinogenic mushrooms or overheated in the sun. But when scientists arrived there in the 1950s during Henri Lott and number 39's expedition, they found something even stranger. Among the hunting and fishing scenes were figures that did not look like people at all. Lot called them roundheads. They were gigantic, up to 6 meters tall, images of creatures in strange suits resembling spacesuits. They had round, faceless heads, sometimes with antennae, and floated in the air above small human figures who stretched their arms towards them. One of the frescoes, known as the Great God of Sifar, looks so sinister and modern that proponents of the ancient contact theory still use it as primary evidence.
The internet is full of theories that claim Tassili Najar is an ancient spaceport, and the drawings are chronicles of visits from other worlds or even parallel universes, portals that open in these rocks. But the truth, revealed by climatologists and paleobotanists, turned out to be far more dramatic than any UFO fiction. Scientists have drilled into the bottom of dried-up lakes and collected samples of ancient pollen. The analysis reveals that the Sahara is not a perpetual desert, but rather a climate pendulum. The Earth does not rotate in a straight line. It wobbles slightly, like a spinning top slowing down. This process is called precession. Approximately every 20,000 years, the tilt of the Earth's axis changes, causing the tropical rain belt to shift northward. The last such green period was very recent in geological terms, between 10,000 and 5,000 years ago. The Sahara was a paradise back then. It was an endless savanna, similar to present-day Tanzania. Deep rivers, kilometers wide, flowed through it, merging into a single river network. In the heart of the desert lay Lake Megachad, a body of water larger than the Caspian Sea. Imagine a freshwater sea in the middle of Africa. Their people lived in abundance, well-fed, and happy. They didn't have to fight for resources. There was food in abundance. They created a unique culture. They painted, danced, and sailed. They didn't know their time was running out. About 5,000 years ago, the cosmic pendulum swung back. The changes occurred with alarming speed. Perhaps in just a few hundred years, the rain stopped, rivers dwindled to streams, and then to dry riverbeds. The grass turned yellow and crumbled to dust. The lakes evaporated, leaving only salt. Paradise became a desert. The drawings from the later period are filled with melancholy. Animals disappear. The scenes become more schematic. Images of weapons and battles appear. People begin killing each other over the last puddles of water. The survivors fled east to the only river that had not dried up, the Nile. Historians believe it was this influx of climate refugees from the dying Sahara that spurred the creation of Egyptian civilization. Pyramids, sphinxes, pharaohs, all of this could be an attempt by the people to preserve the memory of the lost paradise they left behind in the sands. But the most surprising thing is that this cycle hasn't ended. Computer models show that the pendulum will swing again. In about 15,000 years, the Earth's axis will shift, the rains will return, and the Sahara will bloom again. The Sahara will once more become a garden. So, if you're thinking of buying a property there, just wait. But while some fled to the Nile, others chose to stay and fight against the advancing desert. And what they built remained invisible to us for thousands of years, until we learned to see through the soil. For a long time, historians believed that there were never any large states in the central Sahara. Only nomads, Bedouins, and the occasional caravan traveling from oasis to oasis. But in 2011, satellite images revealed something strange. Beneath Libya's layer of sand, clear geometric outlines were visible. Squares, straight lines, and the remains of foundations. These were real cities. More than 100 fortified settlements, castles, and fortresses about which we knew nothing. This was the Garamantian Empire. The Romans called them savage barbarians. But in reality, the Garamantians performed a technological miracle. They built a flourishing garden in the middle of absolute hell. They had their own writing system, metallurgy, an army of chariots, and even two-story houses with cobblestone streets. And this at a time when Europe was shrouded in darkness. But the main question that plagued archaeologists was where they got their water. There are no rivers or rain, and the nearest body of water is thousands of kilometers away. The answer came when they started digging deeper. The Garamantians didn't pray for rain. They took pits and dug underground. They created a Pagari system. This consists of thousands of kilometers of underground tunnels hand dug into the rock. Without lasers, without drilling rigs, the Garamante slaves dug narrow passageways, often working in complete darkness and stifling air, risking being buried alive at any moment. They drilled into the aquifers hidden beneath the hills, let the water flow by gravity into the valley. It was an engineering network comparable to the subway of a modern metropolis. The water flowed at great depths and only surfaced where it was needed to irrigate the fields. Thanks to this, they cultivated wheat, grapes, figs, and dates, where today, not even camel corn can survive. But this technology became their curse. They lived on credit. The water they extracted was fossil water, accumulated there for thousands of years. As the empire grew, appetites increased, and the water table began to drop. The tunnels had to be dug deeper, longer, and more dangerous. At some point, the system became too complex to maintain, and water became scarce. This turned into an ecological trap. When the water receded, the cities emptied, the sand returned, and swallowed everything, leaving us only ghostly outlines in photos from space. But if the Garamantes died slowly, the next mystery of the Sahara hints at a catastrophe that occurred instantaneously and with monstrous force. When the famous archaeologist Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, he was dazzled by the brilliance of the gold. But among the masks and treasures, there was one object that baffled the jewelers even more: a luxurious pectoral worn by the young pharaoh. At its center stood a sacred scarab, a symbol of rebirth. Carter and his team believed it was made of a rare quartz. But decades later, mineralogists performed a detailed chemical analysis and were astonished. It was glass. The crystal from the Libyan desert, lemon yellow in color, was purer and more transparent. And the mystery lay not in its beauty, but in its origin. The problem is that this type of glass isn't simply found under our feet in nature. To transform ordinary Saharan sand into such pure glass, it must be heated instantaneously to a temperature of nearly 2,000 degrees Celsius, and this must happen in fractions of a second. Neither a forest fire nor a volcano, much less an ancient human-caused fire, could produce that much heat. By comparison, volcanic lava is almost twice as cool. This immediately gave rise to the theory of ancient nuclear warfare. Ancient texts were cited, and there was talk of weapons of the gods that melted rocks. The Sahara has become a testing ground for extraterrestrial fantasies, but scientists have been searching for a more mundane, though no less terrifying, explanation. They started looking for a crater. The logic is simple. If it was a meteorite impact, there should be a huge hole. They surveyed the entire Libyan desert, every square meter. They found no giant crater that could explain the scattering of glass across an area of 1,000 square kilometers. It seemed like a dead end. But the answer came when physicists uploaded the data to supercomputers and simulated the fall of celestial bodies. The scene they witnessed was terrifying. About 29 million years ago, an asteroid entered Earth's atmosphere over the Sahara. But it didn't fall to Earth. Due to its enormous speed and air resistance, it exploded in the sky, just a few kilometers from touching the surface. This is called an airburst, but it was so powerful that the atomic bomb in Hiroshima would have looked like a child's firework. At the moment of the explosion, a second sun shone in the sky. The fireball was so hot that the heat wave struck the desert like a hammer. It literally melted the sand surface for hundreds of kilometers around without even touching the ground. Imagine how the dunes instantly turned into rivers of liquid glass. Then everything cooled down, the glass shattered, and the desert was strewn with precious pieces. Thousands of years later, the pharaoh's men collected them, believing they were frozen rays from the god Ra. And, in a way, they were right. The Sahara looks like a place of death. Dead whales, dead empires, melting sand. But beneath all this death lies a resource that is now more valuable than gold. And that is perhaps the desert's most important secret. In the mid-20th century, when geologists were searching for oil in Libya, their drilling platforms reached the desert floor. Everyone expected black gold, but instead of oil, the wells gushed forth a source of crystal clear, cold, and fresh water. At first, nobody believed it. Where does water come from in the driest place on Earth, where it might not rain for years? It turns out that the Nubian aquifer lies hidden hundreds of meters deep beneath the inert sands of the Sahara. It's not just an underground river or lake, it's a veritable subterranean ocean. 2,500,000 cubic kilometers of fresh water. To give you an idea of the magnitude of this figure, if this water were pumped to the surface, it would flood the entire territory of Germany, France, and Spain combined. It is a legacy of those verdant times when tropical rains fell upon the Sahara. The water has filtered through the sand for millions of years, drop by drop, and has finally become trapped in rock formations deep underground. This is the water the dinosaurs drank. This is the water that recalls the youth of the world. And this is Africa's most precious treasure. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi hailed this discovery as the eighth wonder of the world and launched the grandest and craziest engineering project in the continent's history, the Great Man-Made River. Imagine pipes so large a truck could fit inside them. Thousands of kilometers of similar pipes stretched across the desert, like veins pumping the Earth's lifeblood. Water from the depths of the Sahara flowed to the coastal cities, transforming the desert into gardens. This gave life to millions of people. He proved that man can compete with nature. But this story also has a dark side. The Nubian aquifer is a non-renewable resource. It no longer rains to replenish it. We drink water from a bottle that will never be refilled. Scientists are debating how long this will last, whether 100 years or 500. But the fact is that once we finish this Eocene cocktail, the tap will be turned off forever. The Sahara stores water, but it doesn't give it away indefinitely. And this story reminds us of the fate of the Garamantes, whom we discussed earlier. They too believed that water was infinite. We began this journey with the idea that the desert was empty. Now we know that's the biggest illusion. The Sahara is a multi-layered cake of time. If you peel back the top layer, you'll find lost cities and technologies we can't replicate. Dig deeper, and you'll see green meadows with giraffes and People who don't know that their paradise will soon burn down. Dig even deeper, and you'll find a seabed teeming with whale bones and legs. And if you drill into the very darkness, you'll find water that has been waiting for us for millions of years. The Sahara teaches us an important lesson. Stability is a myth. Climate, geography, life itself, everything is temporary. What today seems like an eternal and invincible desert could become tomorrow's ocean floor. And our prosperous megacities, in 10,000 years' time, could be covered in dunes, leaving behind only strange fragments of glass and pieces of plastic. The planet is constantly changing its landscape, and we are mere spectators of this spectacular spectacle, trying to unravel the plot from the traces it has left behind.